I've been saving for years for the down payment on my first house. That's what I kept telling myself every time I passed up a weekend getaway or skipped out on a dinner with friends. It was all going to be worth it when I could finally walk into a place I owned. A place where I wouldn't have to ask anyone for permission to hang up a picture or make a late-night snack without feeling like I was disturbing the peace. I was 32, financially stable, and living in a small but cozy apartment. I'd moved out of my parents' house a few years ago, after years of feeling like a stranger in my own home. I was the oldest of two daughters, but from what I could tell, I'd always been the invisible one. My younger sister, Kate, had always been the golden child. Everything she did, from her high school academic achievements to her adult life choices, seemed to be wrapped in a bow of perfection. My parents hung on every word she spoke, while I was the responsible one, the one who always did what was expected of her, who stayed out of trouble and didn't ask for much. Kate's life was different. She was married to a great guy, had a beautiful house, and, for the most part, seemed to have it all. But for all of Kate's blessings, she'd struggled with something that I couldn't quite relate to: fertility issues. My parents, of course, were deeply invested in her struggle, offering support whenever they could. They talked about it constantly, especially my mom. Every conversation somehow found its way back to Kate's journey to motherhood, as they like to call it. I wasn't one to judge. I knew that it must have been hard for her. But in the back of my mind, I had a quiet resentment that I couldn't shake. My life had always been second place in my family. Even when I managed to achieve something big, like landing a promotion or paying off a major debt, my parents were quick to remind me how proud they were of Kate's latest accomplishments. It was like I could never fully shine in their eyes, and that used to be okay. But as I got older, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that they would never fully see me. But none of that mattered in the grand scheme of things. I had my goals, my future to think about, and nothing was going to stop me from reaching them. It all started with the call. My mom was frantic on the other end of the line. "Can you talk?" she asked, her voice tight with tension. "Sure," I replied, sitting up straighter on the couch. "What's going on?" "Kate's doctor said that the IVF treatment is the next step, and it's going to cost a fortune. We've been talking to her about how we can help, and we just need a little more to make sure she can go through with it." I froze. I knew what that meant. I had been saving every penny I could for the past 3 years. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a down payment on a small place of my own, which I desperately wanted to get before I turned 35. The thought of not being able to own my own home made me sick to my stomach, but what happened next shattered everything. My mom's words spilled out in a rushed explanation. "We used the rest of your savings. We knew you'd want to help her. She deserves a chance at motherhood." There it was, the sting of betrayal, the reality of my parents choosing my sister over me, once again, in a way that I couldn't ignore. They'd used all my savings. They had taken everything I had worked so hard for and handed it over to Kate without asking me, without even considering what that would mean for me. It wasn't just the money, it was the complete lack of respect. My mom's voice faltered, but there was no apology in it, just justification. She thought I'd be fine with it because, after all, Kate was family. I don't even remember the specifics of the conversation after that. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could barely hear anything through the ringing in my ears. I was trying to keep it together, trying to stop the flood of anger and hurt that was threatening to break me down. "Mom," I finally said, my voice colder than I intended, "you used my money without asking me, without even telling me what you were doing? You didn't even give me a choice." She sighed, the sound heavy with guilt. "We thought it was the right thing to do. Kate's been through so much." "And what about me?" I shot back. "What about my future? What about my plans? What about everything I've worked for? Do I get a say in that?" The line was silent for a moment before she finally whispered, "I'm sorry." But I wasn't ready to forgive her. I wasn't ready to just let it go, to pretend everything was fine. So I did the only thing I could think of. I canceled their access to my bank accounts. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about my dignity, my future, and my peace of mind. I couldn't let them get away with this. I couldn't let them think they could take from me without any consequences. I didn't expect them to understand. But I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for myself. The calls started pouring in, but I ignored them. They left me messages, some apologetic, others defensive, but all begging for me to reconsider. I could hear their guilt through the phone, but I didn't care. I had heard enough excuses. I didn't expect them to understand, but I needed them to realize one thing: I was done being second place. The morning after I canceled my parents' access to my bank accounts, I woke up to a storm of texts and missed calls. I had already known what to expect, but seeing it all laid out in front of me, like a long string of desperate pleas, made my blood boil all over again. My phone buzzed constantly, one message after another, all from my mom. "Please call me. We need to talk." "I'm sorry. I know you're upset, but we didn't think it would be a big deal. Kate is really struggling with this. I didn't know what else to do. Please understand." I could feel my pulse quicken with every word. She didn't know what else to do. What about me? Had anyone asked me what I wanted, or was I just supposed to quietly accept that my sister's fertility struggles were more important than my own future? The anger simmered beneath the surface, and I found myself gripping my phone so tightly, my fingers ached. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I walked to the kitchen and made a cup of coffee, something I did out of habit whenever I needed to clear my head. It didn't work. The moment I took my first sip, I saw another text pop up, this one from Kate. "I'm really sorry you're upset, but you need to understand how much this means to me. I'm just trying to have a family. I thought you'd support me in this. I don't know why you're acting like this." I let out a dry laugh, though it felt more like a scoff. "You thought I'd support you?" I muttered to myself. How convenient for her to play the victim when I was the one who had been completely disregarded. How long had she been the center of everything? I shook my head and stared at the text, my fingers hovering over the screen as I thought about how I should respond. But I didn't have the energy for a fight with her. Instead, I tapped out a message to my mom. "I'll talk to you later." Then, as if a switch had flipped, I heard the ring of my phone, my mom again. I hesitated, but then picked up. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Oh, thank God!" "I was beginning to think you were ignoring me on purpose," my mom said in a rush, clearly relieved. "Please, just let me explain. You don't understand how hard this has been on Kate. She's been through so much, and the IVF is our last hope for her to have a family." "Yeah," I replied, my voice cold. "I got your message. You're upset, and I understand that, but this was just an emergency. We didn't know what else to do. Kate needed it, and we didn't want to see her struggle anymore." I could feel the frustration bubbling up in me, but I took a deep breath, trying to hold it in. "You didn't even ask me," I said, trying to keep calm, but the words came out tighter than I intended. "You didn't think I'd care, did you? You just took my money." There was a long pause, and I could hear my mom's breath hitch. "Sweetheart, we didn't mean to hurt you. You've been so good about saving for your house, but we thought you'd understand. We just wanted to help Kate. This could be her only chance, and you're her sister. You should be proud to support her." That was it, wasn't it? They'd always seen Kate as the one who needed the help, the one who deserved everything. My mind flashed back to all those years of feeling like the backup plan, the one who took a back seat to Kate's needs, and suddenly everything clicked. They had always treated me like I was strong enough to shoulder whatever was thrown at me, but it was never about me. It was always about Kate. "I don't even know what to say to you right now," I said, my voice barely containing the bitterness that was creeping in. "You've always done this. I've always been the one who just deals with things, but not this time, Mom. Not with something this important to me." "You're overreacting," she said, her voice pleading, as though trying to calm me down. "We'll pay you back, I swear. You're always so calm, so rational, Please don't let this ruin everything. You're going to make things worse." "I didn't make things worse. You did," I snapped. "I don't know why you think it's okay to take from me, but I can't just let it go. Not this time." "You're punishing Kate for something she didn't do," my mom cried. "She didn't ask for this. She didn't want to be in this position. She just wants a family, like anyone else would." I wanted to scream at her, to finally make her understand that this wasn't about Kate anymore. It was about me. It was about my dreams, my future, my right to control what happened to the money I worked so hard to earn. But instead, I closed my eyes and exhaled, trying to steady myself. "You don't get it, Mom. This isn't about Kate. This is about me and my future. I'm done being second. I'm done with all of this." There was silence on the other end of the line for what felt like forever. I could feel the weight of the moment settling in. This wasn't a small disagreement. It was everything, and I was done. "I've already canceled your access to my account," I said quietly. "You can't take anything else from me." For a moment, I thought she was going to argue, but then I heard her let out a long, shaky breath. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Please don't shut us out." But it was too late. I had already made my decision. I didn't expect my parents to give up so easily, but I also didn't anticipate just how much they would try to wear me down. The calls kept coming, text after text, and though I didn't respond right away, each one left me feeling more suffocated by their guilt and manipulation than the last. They weren't just asking for forgiveness, they were begging, pleading with me as though I'd committed some unforgivable sin by cutting them off. The weight of it all pressed down on me, each message more insistent than the last. But I stayed strong, even though, deep inside, I was torn. After a few days of silence, my mom finally came by. I had been bracing myself for this. I knew she would try to talk to me in person, to somehow break through the barrier I had erected between us. She rang the doorbell, and I hesitated, unsure if I should even open the door. But the faint sound of her voice calling my name from the other side made me do it. "Please, just hear me out," she said, her face strained but soft. She looked vulnerable, like someone who was just a little too far gone to know how to backtrack. "You've been so angry. I understand, but I don't know how else to explain it. Kate has been through so much, and this was her last chance." I stared at her, trying not to let my frustration show. "Mom, I get it, but that doesn't mean you get to take what's mine without asking. You didn't even consider how this would affect me." Her eyes widened with that familiar look of shock, like I was the one being unreasonable. "We thought you'd want to help. We thought you'd understand. You've always been the independent one. Kate's been struggling with this for years. You've always been fine on your own, so what's the big deal?" The words hit me harder than I expected, and for a brief second, I felt that familiar pang of doubt, the kind that crept up every time my parents made me feel like I was being too much, too emotional, too sensitive, too demanding. But I pushed it aside. This was not about me being unreasonable. This was about respect, and my parents treating me like I didn't matter as much as Kate. "No, Mom, it is a big deal. This was my money, and you didn't even ask me if I was okay with it." She shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "I didn't think you'd mind. We were only thinking about Kate. That was it. Only thinking about Kate." It hit me like a ton of bricks. This was a pattern. This was always the case. My entire life, I had been the one to support everyone else while they used my strength as a backdrop for Kate's needs. And somewhere along the way, I stopped caring about my own because I knew no one else would. "Mom, you've always done this. Kate's always been the priority, and I've been fine with it. I've taken care of myself. I've never asked for anything, but this is too much," I said, my voice growing quieter with each word. "You've never really seen me, have you? You've always been so focused on her. I'm just the one who takes care of everything in the background, never getting any of the attention, any of the help." She stood there in stunned silence, as though she hadn't really considered it before. She hadn't seen me. "Are you saying you want us to stop helping Kate?" she asked, her voice trembling, as if the idea had never crossed her mind. That's not fair. She's family. She's your sister. I'm not asking you to stop helping her, Mom, I shot back. But I'm not just here to play second fiddle to her life anymore. You used my savings without even considering that I had plans, my plans. Do you know how long it took me to save that money? Do you know what it feels like to have you take it from me without a second thought? How much it hurts? My mom's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't back down. You have no idea what it feels like to be overlooked like that, Mom. I've worked my entire life to make sure that I'm not a burden, but this isn't about being self-sufficient. It's about being respected. I could see the wheels turning in her head, as if she was trying to put together the pieces of something she had never really thought about. For years, she'd only seen Kate's struggles, her pain, her needs, without ever looking at me, without ever acknowledging that I might have struggles of my own. The conversation didn't end well. My mom left that afternoon, tears in her eyes, but no closer to understanding what I was going through. That night, I received a call from Kate. I wasn't surprised. She had probably gotten wind of the conversation with our mom. She started off by sounding calm, but I could tell she was hurt. I heard what you said to Mom, she said, her voice tight with emotion. I don't know why you're making this about you. This is about me. I'm the one who's been struggling, who's been trying to get pregnant for years. Don't you think I deserve a chance to be a mother? Her words were like a slap to the face. Of course, I understood her struggle, but the way she was speaking like I was the villain in her story made my stomach churn. I'd always been her safety net, always there for her in the background. And now she was turning the tables on me, making me feel like I was the one who was being selfish. You think I don't know that, Kate? I said, keeping my voice steady despite the burning anger inside. I've always supported you, but this isn't just about your fertility struggles. It's about how you and Mom have been treating me for years. It's about the fact that I've been completely erased from the picture. You get everything, and I'm left with nothing. No help, no support, just nothing. Stop making this about you, she snapped, her voice rising. You don't know what it's like to want something so badly, to feel like you're failing every time. You don't know what it's like to be desperate for something you can't have. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. No, I don't know what it's like to want something desperately, but I know what it's like to work hard for something and have it stolen away without my consent, and that's what happened here. You both took what was mine, and I'm done letting you think it's okay. I hung up before she could say anything more. I didn't want to hear it, not anymore. The next few days were filled with more texts, more messages. My mom sent apologies. Kate sent angry rants. But I didn't respond. I was done with the excuses, done with the guilt trips, done with being the one who always had to give in. I was ready to move on and take control of my own future. If they couldn't see that, then it was their loss. I was no longer the invisible daughter, and I wasn't going to let anyone treat me like that again. The day they showed up at my apartment was the day I knew it was over. It wasn't a phone call, it wasn't a text. It was a physical presence I couldn't ignore. My parents standing on my doorstep as if the last few days of silence had never happened. They were here to fix things, to make me understand why they'd done what they did. I stood there for a long moment, staring at them through the peephole. My mom, looking like she hadn't slept in days, her eyes red from crying. My dad, stiff as always, standing next to her, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. I could tell they weren't going to leave until they had gotten through to me, until they had convinced me that their actions were justified. But I was done. Done with the guilt. Done with the manipulation, done with their endless excuses. I opened the door. "What are you doing here?" I asked, the words more blunt than I intended, but I didn't care. I was beyond polite, beyond trying to play nice. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. "We need to talk," my mom said, her voice shaky. "Please, just give us a chance to explain." I stepped back, letting them in, though every fiber of my being screamed for me to close the door on them. They walked into my living room as if it was still their place, like everything that had happened didn't matter, like they hadn't taken everything from me. I didn't waste time with small talk. Explain what? I crossed my arms and looked them both in the eye. Explain how you used my savings to pay for Kate's IVF without asking me, without even telling me what you were doing until after it was done? You don't get to explain that away. My mom started to cry again, the tears falling freely now, but I wasn't moved. I'd heard all her excuses already. Please, don't be so hard on us, she said, wiping her eyes. You don't understand how difficult it's been for Kate. She's been trying for years, and you know how much she's suffered. We just wanted to help her get the family she's always dreamed of. You should be happy for her. You should want to help. I felt the heat rise in my chest, the anger I'd been holding in for days bubbling over. I am happy for her. Of course I am. But this isn't helping her. This is about you feeling good about yourself. This is about you using me to fix your daughter's problems without giving a damn about what it does to me. I can't believe you're saying this. Kate's voice came from behind me. I hadn't even heard her walk in. She had arrived, too, right on cue. She was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, looking as defensive as ever. Her face was flushed, her lips pressed into a thin line. You're acting like I asked for this, like I wanted to be in this position. I turned to face her, my frustration boiling over. You didn't ask for it, Kate? You didn't expect them to come running to help you? You're the one who has always been their priority. Her expression faltered for just a second, and in that brief moment, I saw it, the guilt, the knowledge that deep down, she knew I wasn't wrong. But instead of acknowledging it, she doubled down, her voice rising. I don't get it. I really don't. You don't know what it's like to feel like you're broken, to feel like you can't do what everyone else can. I've been through hell, and you... She stopped herself, as if searching for the right words, then added, You just don't care. You've never cared. That was it. The words I had been waiting for. The moment I realized there was no going back, no hoping we could ever understand each other. I could feel my heart racing, the blood pounding in my ears as everything came to a head. You don't get it, Kate, I said, my voice steady but fierce. I'm not the one who's been pretending that everything is fine. I'm not the one who's been lying to myself about what's been happening. You and Mom and Dad have all been treating me like I'm nothing, like I'm some sort of backup plan, someone who'll always be there to clean up after you. I turned my gaze to my parents, both of them avoiding my eyes now, looking at the floor, but they couldn't avoid me forever. I'm done, I said, my voice so calm, so certain. I'm done being the understanding one. Done being the one who's okay with taking a backseat to Kate's life. I've let you do this to me for years, but not anymore. I could see my mom's lip tremble as she opened her mouth to say something, but I wasn't giving her the chance. I'm done, I repeated, this time with finality. And I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm asking for respect. If you can't give me that, then you can't be in my life anymore. For a long moment, there was only silence. My mom was crying openly now, her face a mess of emotion. My dad, always the stoic one, didn't speak, but I could see the strain on his face. Kate looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time, her expression a mixture of disbelief and resentment. But I didn't care anymore. I had said what I needed to say, and in that moment I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. Finally, my mom spoke. We didn't mean for this to happen. We never meant to hurt you. You're our daughter, too. I know, I replied, my voice softening, but still resolute. But you've hurt me anyway. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me as my parents and sister turned to leave. They didn't understand, and maybe they never would, but I didn't need them to. As I watched them walk out of my apartment, I finally felt the freedom I had been craving. The weight of their expectations, their manipulation, it all lifted in an instant. I had finally made the decision that was best for me. I had chosen myself, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. The next few days were quiet, not the peaceful kind of quiet that comes with relaxation, but the heavy silence of finally confronting the truth. I didn't know what I expected, maybe an apology, maybe for my family to come to their senses and finally realize how wrong they'd been. But I didn't get any of that. Instead, there was just the sound of my own thoughts echoing in the empty spaces they'd left behind. The morning after they left, I woke up to a message from my mom, but it was just another apology, wrapped in guilt. "I'm sorry for everything, but please know that we didn't mean to hurt you. We love you." There was no mention of how they were going to fix things, no mention of what they were willing to do to make it right. Just a vague emotional plea. I deleted it without replying. That's the thing with family, isn't it? They always want to fix things on their terms. They wanted to smooth everything over with apologies and empty promises, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I wasn't interested in the easy fix. I wasn't going to be content with hollow words that would just be forgotten the moment they thought they had me back in line. I knew what I had to do, even if it wasn't easy. I spent the next week doing the one thing I hadn't allowed myself to do for years, taking control. I began looking at houses, actually researching neighborhoods, and planning my next steps. Every house I saw, every listing I pored over, I realized something that made my heart a little lighter. I was doing this for me. There was no one to answer to, no one to beg for permission or approval. This was my future, my decision. It felt like the first real step in reclaiming who I was. Then came the inevitable conversation with Kate. She called a few days later, and I was dreading it, but I knew I had to get it over with. The call came in late, and I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Hey," I said, my voice steady. "Hey," she replied, sounding as distant as I felt. "I'm sorry, okay? I don't know why you're making this so difficult." There was a slight edge to her voice, the same defensiveness I had come to expect from her. "Kate, I'm not making it difficult," I replied. "This isn't about you anymore. It's about me, about my life. You've gotten so much support, so much focus, but I've never asked for anything from anyone, and when I finally do, when it's about my future, you take what's mine. You take my money, my savings. I've always been in the background, and I'm done with that." There was silence on the other end, and I could practically hear her struggling to find the right words, the right defense. She finally sighed, exasperated. "I didn't mean for it to be like this, but it was my last chance to have a baby. Don't you understand that?" "I do understand," I said, trying to stay calm. "But that doesn't give anyone the right to take from me without my permission. You've always had Mom and Dad's support. I've been the one left behind, the one expected to just handle it. But not anymore. I'm standing up for myself now, Kate, and you're going to have to accept that." She didn't answer for a long time, and when she did, her voice was quieter, tinged with something like resignation. "I don't know how we got here. I don't know how things got so bad between us. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I said, my tone softening just a little. "But this is what it is now. I'm not going to keep sacrificing myself for the sake of other people's happiness. I have to do what's right for me, Kate. And if that means stepping away from all of this, so be it." It felt like a weight lifted off my chest, as though saying those words out loud finally made them real. And though I knew it wasn't the resolution either of us had hoped for, it was the only one I could offer. It was the only way I could keep my sanity intact. The days passed, and I kept moving forward. My parents kept trying to reach out, sending more texts, more voicemails, and each one felt like an attempt to rewrite the past, to make it seem like they could just erase the hurt they caused. But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. A week later, I got a call from my mom. Her voice was softer this time, as if she was finally hearing me. "I'm sorry for how everything went down," she said, "but I need you to understand I did what I thought was best for Kate. I wasn't thinking about the consequences for you, and I should have. You're my daughter too, and I shouldn't have treated you like an afterthought." It was the apology I had been waiting for, and while it didn't fix everything, it was a start. But it wasn't enough to undo the damage. I still wasn't ready to let them back in. "I hear you," I said, "but I need time. I need to process all of this." That was all I said, and for once, it felt like enough. I spent the next few months focusing on my life, on my goals. I secured a loan, found a house I loved, and signed the papers. It felt surreal, knowing that I had done it, by myself. No one to help, no one to hold my hand. It was mine, my achievement, my success. When I moved in, I stood in the living room of my new home, the keys in my hand, and I realized that I had finally taken control of my life. My parents hadn't given it to me, my sister hadn't handed it to me. It was mine, earned through my hard work and my resilience, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible anymore.